Thank you so very much for that. And I also, at this time, it is our tradition to read the mission and vision statement for Richmond School.
Richmond Community Schools guide students on pathways of learning to a future of limitless possibilities.
And the vision?
Richmond Community Schools, a community nurturing mind, body, and spirit to prepare students for life of choice, purpose, and service.
Very good. I might remind board members to maybe get your mic a little closer, yes? I think we may be having trouble picking some of you up. And I would be one of those most of the time, so I'll try to. Next are celebrations and reflections.
Okay, so our first celebration reflection tonight is actually going to be our bell ringer, but we didn't want to ask all of the students and teachers to hang around till the end of the meeting. So at this time, I am going to ask Mr. Rusty Hensley if he would approach the podium, please. And he is going to introduce our students that have qualified for nationals in many different areas. So, Mr.
I'm probably okay with the microphone. I might be too loud, but thanks for letting us come. It's always a great time this time of year. We have 4 different academic teams in career and tech ed, and 3 of those have the opportunity to go to nationals. Proud to say this year that all 3 groups are going to nationals. 2 groups are going to Texas, 1 going to Louisville. So it's been a fun spring, getting ready to get cranked up to do that. We got obviously graduation and all of our honors and awards banquets coming up as well. So first group we're going to have is Business Professionals of America. Denise Selm's going to come up with her group. Each student will introduce themselves, tell you which area they're going in, and they'll be heading off to Texas here in a couple weeks. So,
Wow.
BPA, come on up.
Somebody got a pants on.
Good evening.
Evening.
As
Hello.
Rusty Hensley said, my name is Denise Salm. I'm one of the BPA advisors at Richmond High School, along with Angie Witham. And I brought a few of our national qualifiers this evening. We took 20 students to state, and of the 20, 8 of them qualified for the National Leadership Conference, which is in Dallas, Texas this year, from May 9th to the 12th.
Wow.
So I will go ahead and let them introduce themselves and maybe mention your name, the event that you'll be competing in, and what place you got at state, and then your grade level. Okay, and then feel free to ask some questions, and then I'll come back and I'll just mention the students that weren't able to be here and what they qualified in as well.
Hi everyone, my name is Sunny, and I got the 2nd place in the state competition for the entrepreneurship, and I'm in 12th grade now. Okay. Thank you.
My name's Hannah. I'm in 12th grade, and I got 2nd at state for legal office procedures, and then I'm also in a virtual team that only competes at nationals, and so I don't know my placing, but we got top 10 for sure.
Cool. Awesome.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth. I'm a senior as well, and I placed 4th for fundamentals of spreadsheeting at States.
My name is Gabriel Meyer. I got 4th place for PC servicing and troubleshooting.
That's cool.
What grade?
I'm a freshman.
That's pretty good. Qualify as a
Well, you got time to move up.
Okay.
And Elizabeth, what was your last name?
Weber.
Very good.
Oh, that's cool.
Okay.
I think we might know your
Slightly
dad.
familiar.
Oh, man. So, Sonny, when you did entrepreneurship, was there a specific topic or something that you did, or it's just broad?
I wrote a business plan about the most novel business. It's kind of like an online novel website that can provide a platform for the people to, read the book, and they will get the ebooks directly from us to their Kindles. Yeah, kind of like online book boxes.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
That's really good.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to say, Denise and Angie, who's not here, I mean, you guys have done a great job with this for years. I've witnessed it firsthand, and you guys should be very proud, and I expected nothing less from you guys. So it's,
How you guys feel? You excited, nervous about going to Dallas? Huh?
It'll be my first time flying.
Oh, that's awesome. That's
You guys make
awesome.
sure you get around him and hold his hand, okay? Well, I'm pretty impressed with you guys. That's pretty impressive. Thank
That's
you so
amazing.
much for sharing with us. I really appreciate your time and the fact that you came here after school to do that. Thank you so much.
Who are missing students?
Yes, we're missing Emery's Martinez. She qualified for desktop publishing and graphic design, and she got first in the state. We have Carolyn Kramer and Naomi Carter, who will be working at the virtual event with Hannah with their startup enterprise business, which was also a business where they prepared a business plan.
Wow.
And they get to present in a virtual showcase.
Neat.
Which is it's really neat to see. And then we also have Joshua Watson, and he qualified in PC servicing and troubleshooting as well, and systems administration using Cisco. So he'll be competing in 2 events.
Impressive.
John, anything to add? Or?
That's really
Like her mom.
impressive. That's really-
The other thing I'd really move on. The other thing I'd really like to thank everybody for their support at our fundraiser. We do the Shamrock 5K, 10K at the high school, and we had 180 finish again this year in the event. Raised a lot of money to help support the national qualifiers and give them a little help with the price of competing at that level. And then also, I just thought I'd mention that Charles had 22 participate in the Shamrock, so I kind of wanted to make a shout out to them and
my
thank
goodness,
them
that's
because
great.
they had
Wow.
a huge participation from that school that supported us. So thought I would-
Awesome job,
Thank you.
guys. Awesome.
Just doing a race like that is entrepreneurial, which I appreciate that you guys do that.
Yes,
because
our
that-
students helped. They, I call it directing with a little bit of help from me, but I let them direct to kind of take over and do the planning and get with businesses for donations and do the promotion of the event. And yeah, it's a good experience for them.
that is an additional wonderful experience, I think, to plan that level of an event. So that's very impressive.
Yeah,
Well,
awesome,
and
guys. Awesome.
You guys have had a long-standing tradition of success and winners and national competition and all that, so we wish you guys all the luck in the world and have fun in Texas.
Yes.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
Next group we'll have Heidi and her group. Next group's out of our biomedical, our HOSA group. This is the third year, I believe they have had the opportunity to go to state competition and to nationals. So at this time, if Heidi will come up and her students, she can introduce them. They're also going to Texas.
Wow.
Texas is the place to go.
Texas
this
is
year.
yeah, right.
This is actually our 5th year.
Oh,
Time flies.
wake up,
But
Rusty.
we owe a debt of gratitude to Denise Selm because when I wanted to start the HOSA chapter 5 years ago, she's the one who really talked me through how to get started with all that. So, okay, so we took 22 this year to HOSA State to compete, and 7 of them qualified for nationals. So that picture that you guys saw was our seniors. We also had 2 juniors qualify, Josh Jones and Justin Perdomo, and they were on a HOSA Bowl team. Sophomore. What did I say? Did I say junior? No, I know they're sophomores. They're sophomores, sorry. And they were on a HOSA Bowl team with Taylor Burton and Maria Vandevoort. And we were super excited because HOSA Bowl is a really fun event. We get to watch the final round. We were sort of insane. Our entire chapter was watching the final round, and the other team only had like 3 people. I don't know. But they had a ton of support, and they placed second in the state. They said if I hadn't been in the room, they might have placed first. But every time they would miss one, they were freaking out looking at me. I tried to keep, anyway. But they did great. They were second. And Taylor also qualified in some other stuff, but I'll let them talk about that. We also had Dylan Selby, a junior, who is one of our local HOSA officers. He was elected to the role of president-elect for next year. And he'll be rising up the following year to be the president of Indiana HOSA, which we're so excited about. So he'll be going to nationals as well in a leadership role this year. But I'll let each of these girls say what they qualified in.
Hi, my name is Taylor Burden. I'm a senior this year, and I qualified in Human Growth and Development with a 3rd place finishing, and hostable in 2nd place.
Hi, I'm Olivia Swander. I placed 2nd in the state in both of my individual events of epidemiology and medical reading.
And then I'm Taylor, and together we, along with Jess, who's not here, she's at tennis right now, we all are seniors, and we got 1st in health education for the 2nd year in a row.
Wow. Impressive.
Congratulations.
Yes.
Yeah, and their health education was absolutely amazing. They ran an event for local middle schoolers, and they created everything for the curriculum and taught them about gene editing and sort of the future of DNA. It was really amazing. So I think they really have a shot at placing at nationals. And these guys and 17 other students are going to run Camp Biomed in June. That's our biggest fundraiser of the year, and we have 37 kids signed up right now to come to Camp Biomed and do brain science. So we're really excited about that.
Well, I think we can say good luck to you guys too.
Absolutely.
And again, you're establishing a rather lengthy tradition of winners again. So Career Center's doing great.
Yeah. Again, I appreciate the creativity in your fundraisers. I think that, I know you drive that, but I think that's amazing because people have purchased 1,000,001 candy bars and some of those kinds of things, and I just appreciate that you guys have tried to take it to a different place. I know it's hard work, but I think Camp Biomed is brilliant. The run is brilliant. I mean, those are really great ways to raise money and create opportunities for the kids for your students to do things that are with meaning and purpose. I think that's awesome.
Congratulations. Thank you.
Camp Biomed still has openings, so if you know any little ones that would like to come, I can say my nephew's been about 4 years in a row and loves it. He would probably give up any sporting event in the summer just to be there, so it's pretty awesome. So,
What are the ages for that?
oh, I knew it. See, you're asking questions. Heidi, what are the ages for Camp Biomed? What grade?
Grades 6 through 9. We have 2 spots left.
Oh, wow.
Well, there's 2 spots. Be
Two.
first. Be first.
Two
So,
and a two and a
last
two.
group we have is our Skills USA group. It's our trades classes that had the opportunity to go. They only take first place. So some of our other 2 programs, they take a certain group that go, but in the Skills USA, you have to be state champion if you go. This year happens to be in Louisville. So if I could have Larry Wilson come up, and come on up, Josh. We'll introduce another one of our state champions.
Hello everyone, my name is Larry Wilson. I'm the new machine shop teacher. We got to take 13 kids from the Technical Career Center to the state championship in Indianapolis. Out of 13 of them, we had one win state, which was Josh Becknell in drafting, technical drafting. A little short story about him. When we got the results, he had an 80%, and then second place was 55%.
Wow.
And he was very upset that he got the 80%. I'm like, you won by a landslide here. He's like, but it's still 80%. So he's a true perfectionist. Caleb Snyder is his drafting teacher. He's doing golf tonight, so he couldn't make it. But good kid, good group of kids. A lot of the teachers in that area are all good, very helpful. So they all did a good job. All the kids did a good job. So Josh Becknell.
Hi, I'm Josh Becknell. I'm a junior, and I got first place in Skills USA and for technical drafting.
Cool.
Wow.
I'm 17 years old.
Well, you'll at least have a chance to improve on that 80% for next year.
Hopefully.
He's like, yes, that's right. I have one
Going
more
to
chance.
state May or June 25th, which is his birthday. So, like
There
I
you
said, that
go.
would be a great birthday present for him to win nationals in Louisville. So.
And if you win, then
I'll win.
80% is okay.
Hopefully.
That's pretty awesome, dude.
So Josh, how do you compete in technical drafting? That was what I've always been curious about.
What they do is they give you a part, and you get to create that part to a certain tolerance to like a hair's thickness and stuff. You can be off by a little bit, and that can cost you a lot of points. So if you were the closest to the part, that's how they grade you, is realism. And
So
stuff.
they hand you one and you have to.
They hand you the actual part and other drawings up, so you can actually write
Holy
down the
cow.
numbers and stuff.
That's awesome.
And they give you calipers and scales and
I
things
brought
like
my own though.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
trust
Yeah,
those.
He didn't trust those.
it's a pretty crazy process. I mean, they're like, here, draw.
I think that's
It's like, okay.
fascinating. I love drafting. I wish I had done it
It's
because
nuts.
I think that's amazing. I can't believe they just hand you that and you have to draw it from what you're holding. That's
I hope you don't feel slighted because you're only going to Louisville instead of Texas.
Fine.
Okay.
you gladly
And
go,
he's
right?
That's right.
And
That's
he's
right.
missing the Derby.
Well,
Are your parents going?
I'm making them go, yeah.
Are they here with
Now,
you?
now, Rusty, next year, no, it might.
My mom texted me while I was going up there saying, did you win any awards? And I decided not to tell her. And when I got home, I said, well, there were 16 of us, and I got first. And they were all ecstatic.
Oh, thank you. Surprise, surprise. Well,
Now,
congratulations.
next year it's going to be in Atlanta, correct?
One more year, Louisville.
Is it one more year, Louisville? Okay. Okay.
Well, that is completely impressive, and I
Yes,
cannot believe that
absolutely.
you don't already have a job offer, so.
Hoping.
Did you
It's
get
coming. I
Did
have
you get
a
any
feeling.
scholarships or anything
Not
at
I
the
know of,
state
yeah.
level?
Well, just wait.
Louisville, yeah, I don't think we'll get some there.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's pretty
I know
awesome.
some of the programs give out scholarships at the state competition, but okay.
Well,
pretty
that's
cool.
Awesome. Good for you.
Yeah, congratulations, man.
And Mr. Wilson, we want to thank you. I know you jumped
Yeah.
in the middle of the year and you
Absolutely.
took off running.
Well, thank you.
And,
Everybody's
That's
been a good
amazing.
help and good group of people.
We appreciate you. Richmond
Ah,
alum, program alum
even
too, right?
better.
Went through the program and everything.
Yeah.
Actually
Oh, that's-
graduated the year before Amos, so it's
Yes.
Oh, that's awesome.
very ironic.
Everybody's
worked
been
out
very
great.
helpful. Rusty's been helpful. Everybody in the school's been helpful. So
Very good. Well, welcome back, and that's awesome.
We're glad to have you and
Well,
congratulations.
Thank you.
And good luck to you too.
Well, thanks for letting us know. I'm sure we'll get back to you on how we do at Nationals, and we'll wish them all good luck when they take off. So thanks for letting us come. this
Thank
evening.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, our next celebration and reflection 2.02 is blended learning. And I'm going to ask Mr. Shunnison if he would come to the podium and provide our presentation this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Terrell. Darren Gowski, distinguished board members. Less important people.
The cast of
Hey,
thousands.
thanks for having me here tonight, and what a great night to be here. I mean, as director of secondary ed, I like to take credit for all those kids up here, but I can't because we have great people in place with Rusty and Ray and those fantastic teachers. Wow, very, very cool coming out of the high school, and so very proud of them. Little side note, Mr. Wilson, he is one of our top people who've really bought in the Canvas. New teacher, came in, he is all over Jeremy Hill getting things in Canvas to help. So here it is, Career and Tech Ed, and he has loved using that in a blended approach for those kids and stepping in that way. I've heard nothing but good things about the way he's blended his instruction, which, you know, in that course, you wouldn't think that that may necessarily be a tool to use. But our Career and Tech Ed teachers are some of the most innovative and willing to try new things when it comes to blended learning. So that's just a side note. I didn't realize he was going to be here tonight. So kudos to him, especially as a new teacher of the corporation halfway through the year. So blended learning, we have been involved in this process for several years now, really before I even came on the ship, and with all the groundwork that's been laid. But recently, we've really tried to focus in on how can we support teachers with all these devices, this new learning management system, and really make teaching transformative. And so I got an email from Mr. Tidrow as one of our opportunities for teachers this year. And basically, it was like, hey, Mike, next week there's this awesome conference that we have 5 free seats to. And it was a fantastic conference. So the people that you see on the screen are the ones that we sent. We sent Sadie Emmerich, Logan Goodwin, Katie Belanger, who's actually here tonight to talk a little bit, and oh gosh, let me see, of course, Matt Hazakoster. And they went to that conference, and it was really Heather Staker, who was one of the co-authors of this book, which we had done a book study the year before on as part of the Next Gen cadre. And so when Rob let me know about this conference, it was a no-brainer to make sure we got teachers there. And so we got some elementary representation and some intermediate representation. And really just because they hadn't had as many devices at those levels prior to this year like the high school had. And so I asked them to try and do a little blended learning with me as well. And so this whole presentation that you're gonna see tonight is actually done virtually. Mr. Hill, myself, Katie, Logan, Matt, Sadie, none of us got together in a room and created this together at the same time. We actually did it over the course of the last few days from wherever. I have no idea where they put this information in, but it was actually a blended experience. And so that's the power of technology that our teachers are embracing. If I can figure this out, we'll see how it goes here. It's all touchscreen, Rob. Do I hit it? Oh, there we go. All right, so there's some examples from Dennis, and this is Sadie Emmerich. She's a first-year teacher. And so we sent her to this conference, and she reluctantly said, yeah, sure, I'll go, you know, my first month of school to a conference and get professional development coming right out of college. And so you can see her seats, you can see her students seated all over the place, and they are you know, writing and looking at their computers and having discussions when it comes to ELA. And so one of the things that the group came back to when they talk about blended learning was they really wanted to focus in on station rotation. And so they've all been dabbling with station rotation, and Katie will give you a real idea about how she does that in her classroom here in a moment. But you talk about novel studies, you talk about group members working together in small groups or in reading circles. And so that's just an example of, let's see, 7th graders at Dennis Intermediate School. Logan Goodwin's classroom, he was actually nominated for Teacher of the Year out of Hibbard. This is some of the examples of social studies where he has, you know, he do some Socratic seminars with students, and you have them working on Today Meet and having discussions over online with each other, and just good old-fashioned writing. I mean, handwriting, writing things out longhand, it's all blended. So it's not all on the computer, not always typing. And then it's very interesting on the far left in blue, that's a Padlet, and the students are giving their take on, from the different groups, on what are some flaws with the Articles of the Confederation. Katie, why don't you come on up and talk about blended math at test. So Katie is not only went to this conference, and I hope that the reason that she became a member of the RCS Next Gen cadre this year was because she went to this conference, and it kind of spurred her and intrigued her. She's shaking her head. She's shaking her head at what she kind of learned at this experience. And I'll just say, Katie's fantastic. We have school corporations calling us, talking to us about, hey, can we visit? And we've tried to work some things out. Her approach to teaching mathematics and the growth that we've seen from our kids and the relationship that she builds with kids is really the approach that she's taken. And she probably doesn't like to be bragged on like this because she's very humble, but she is phenomenal. So tell us about station rotation and kind of your journey, Katie.
Okay, so when I graduated college, I taught 2 years of science, which lends itself to stations and hands-on everything. Then I spent 10 years at home raising my kids. And we moved here, and I applied for the job and got it, and then I was like, oh, it's math. So I dove in to the deep end, and I was like, I'm going to still make it fun, engaging, hands-on. I'm not going to sit and talk to 7th graders who can't sit still anyway for 48 minutes. So I just jumped in and went feet first. This conference has let me clean up a lot of what I had just tried the year before. But like Mr. Shunnis has said, we do a lot of station rotations. So one day, students might be at a technology center, a third of the class, and I can level what they need. Maybe some kids need to have some enrichment, so their technology is a lot harder. Some kids need some reinforcement of some basic skills. They can have an easier lesson in the way that they all have computers, and I can set it through technology to meet their immediate needs of where they are in my lesson. Another group is usually working on something hands-on. You can see in the picture they were slicing Play-Doh 3-dimensional shapes to see what sort of 2-dimensional shape they would get if they sliced it with dental floss. And then the next station they went to was to put it into an Office 365 document, and they had all the information they needed. They also work in small groups with me, so I can be working with 5 or 6 students in a lot smaller groups so I can meet their immediate needs instead of the whole class just listening to me. Some of the other things we've done in small groups would be Kahoot or Padlet. I've had the kids do lots of flip grids where they're videoing themselves talking, and it lets me hear all 150 kids that I have without taking a whole week of hearing what they have to say individually. I asked them what their favorite thing we've done this year yet to put on here, and they told me it was when I let them measure the cafeteria and recreate a design layout of the cafeteria because they wanted to move the tables, and Mr. Mop said if they came up with a way that met his criteria, they could. Unfortunately, they realized there's just too many kids to rearrange the tables in any other way, but they tried so hard to measure every table, every doorway. So, and I only gave them rulers, and they were like, "You want us to measure all this with a ruler?" So, it was really fun.
Oh, that's a really good idea.
Don't go anywhere because
Okay.
there'll be questions, I'm sure. And so it wouldn't be complete without blended learning at Crestdale. And so Matt Hazakoster is like a silent leader in this corporation. So these are some of the things from his classroom. He is also a member of the Next Gen cadre. He is so quiet. He never really wants to share, but he does some pretty fantastic things in his classroom. And he's starting to come out of his shell, I think, a little bit to share more with his colleagues. And it's been great to see just from him. But as you can see here from the pictures, anything from robotics to presentations to Nearpod. It's not all about technology. When we talk about blended learning, it's trying to find that happy medium to meet the kids' needs, but at the same time, maybe change the dynamic in the classroom by leveraging technology. Like Katie said, one of the things you can do is you can record. Kids can record themselves either in Canvas or in a program called Flipgrid, and you can really get a chance to hear what kids are thinking, which is great. And I know as a former teacher of mathematics, you pull kids out in the classroom, and it's hard because especially like little kids, like at Crestdale, I mean, you can maybe trust a 10th or 11th grader to stay focused, but you certainly can't trust a second, third, or fourth grader to do that. So it's been fantastic to see the way teachers have leveraged technology to actually get a chance to listen to what their kids are saying right within the classroom. So this is what some kids are saying about blended learning. Helps me stay organized. I like blended learning because all of my stuff is in one place. Blended learning makes it easier to keep track of things. Blended learning helps me gain knowledge in different ways. Miranda said, blended learning has gone very well. I'm so much more organized. Helps me keep track of paperwork for 7 different classes. And I thought this one was very insightful. You know, we need to continue to find the right balance. This is a kid, now remember. We need to find the right balance. It's all about taking the next step. We need to go from only using the technology to do things you would have already done anyway, and we call that replacement, to having the laptop supplement learning and explore the new frontier. The new frontier, what education can be. And so this is what our kids are saying and they're thinking, and they understand that at first, teachers replace. They take what they're already doing and they put it in the technology. And as we get better at that, then we use technology differently to enhance the lessons. And I know that Katie has found that to be true. I know that many of our teachers have found that to be true, is that's hard to find the best way to use technology as opposed to just taking a worksheet and putting it in the Canvas. And it takes time. But our teachers are going there, and our kids are very insightful, and they're very patient with our teachers, I think. What teachers are saying. So the RCS Next Gen Cadre, I have given you this website before. There's a blog that is ongoing from teachers. Katie, did you want to talk to them about your blog post?
Oh, it was on station rotations in math, yeah. But I will say the Next Gen Cadre, I was a little worried about taking on something else, and I'm so glad I did. It has supplemented so much of what I was already doing, and Megan Tolan from IUPUI, right, has taught me so much of how to streamline what I'm doing and make it easier for me, but more effective for the kids. So it's an awesome opportunity that we have here at RCS.
So we're building like this small army. So here's some quotes out of the Next Gen Cadre Then year 2 came. I decided to stop trying to have my 5-year-olds do what 10 and 12 and 14-year-olds were doing and just focus on the basics. It's a game changer for me. I stopped the negativity and only focused on the positives, the what would work instead of what wouldn't work. That's from Melody. I'm so excited to start this new journey in my teaching career, though, and I can't wait to see the effects it's going to have on future students after this school year. My comfort zone has grown immensely. I never thought I could handle teaching students below the 3rd grade, and I admit I thought that my days of using technology would decline. I didn't have much time to overthink it. I just jumped in. My preconceived notions were all wrong. I can't manage 1st graders, and they can use technology in ways I didn't expect. And then Kathy says, giving students choice in their learning has brightened everything up. They are so much more excited. They are eager to learn and share about it. And she goes on as well. So you can see all of these blog posts. They're on that site. I can give that link to you again if you missed it. But it's a journey. And I'm really proud of our teachers. I'm really proud of our students. And are we there yet? Absolutely not. But like I was saying, as we're building an army, one person at a time. Right now, our army is probably about 50 strong. And the next gen cadre, along with all of our teacher leaders who have embraced technology, I think we're in a positive trend when it comes to finding that balance between laptop, iPad, desktop use, and that hands-on approach, and some traditional just reading, writing type skills. So, any questions for Katie and I on the celebration of our journey in blended learning? I'd be remiss if I didn't say Matt Hazekasser was like, oh my gosh, this is all possible because of devices. So we wanted to thank the school board for the approval the last year or so of getting more devices to the elementary, and he wanted to make sure I plugged more the merrier. So, and I told him I would say something about that, and I promised him I would. But it's true. I mean, if teachers are finding ways to use it and it's improving our learning, then I think that's fantastic. And he has shown that he's very appreciative, and he's using the devices, and so it's been money well spent. So we do appreciate the school board approving those purchases over the last few years.
Mike, I know one of our orchestra teachers just had a blog about blended learning as well. You want to mention that one?
You should really follow on Twitter the EduTry guys. No, Gruber is not a guy, but she is kind of part of that crew. And so she's our orchestra teacher, and she's phenomenal. And it was a fantastic blog post. And basically, it was like, how am I going to utilize technology in the orchestra class?
I think she went as far as to say, they told me I have to. Yeah, right.
Ray's back there. So Ray's leadership at the high school level, Rachel's leadership at Hibbert, and they're at Test as well. I mean, providing opportunities for teachers and giving them room to grow and not slamming them when things don't go right. But it's a fantastic blog post from EduTry guys. And that's a group of teachers, and I think only Bennett, maybe Hill, Jeremy Hill and Brian Bennett are members of the Next Gen cadre, but the other 4 or 5 of that group are not members of the cadre. And that's what I mean. We've got this army that's growing throughout the corporation of these individuals willing to take risks and use a blended approach. And the EduTry guys blog about that, and I would hope that you would check out some of that as well. So, yeah, Lauren is phenomenal. I told her she needs to present statewide, nationwide at conferences, because you go to these conferences and you have art teachers, you have music teachers, you have physical education teachers, and they're not really sure about technology, and she has leveraged it fantastically for her students. So kudos to her.
I'd just like to say thanks to Mr. Shunnison and like my building principals, Mr. Moffett, Mr. Ross, because they let us kind of say, go, do what you think is best for your students, and we'll support you. And that's really reassuring to say, okay, you can try this, and if you fail, fix it for next time. So it's very comforting.
And it's great to see our teachers. That was our message at the beginning of the year, was take risk, and we will support you on that. And it's great to see so many of our teachers stepping out and Katie, we appreciate what you do and that you share with others. Good. Questions, anyone? Let them off that easy?
It was such a great presentation.
Thank you, guys.
Okay. Again, thank you. Those were very good. We are at our first public commentary.
Do we have anyone? No one has signed up?
Then we will go to our consent items.
For your consideration this evening, we have 4.01, approval of minutes, 4.02, human resources, including the addendum at your table, 4.03, accounts payable, 4.04, the monthly financial report.
Okay, do I have a motion to accept the consent items?
I also make a motion.
I have a motion from Jeff.
I second it.
Second from Dixie. Any comments or questions on any of the items? Hearing none. All those in favor of accepting the consent items as presented signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Very good. Action items.
Okay, our first action item this evening is 5.01, donations, and I'm going to ask Mrs. Scalf if she would speak to that, please.
Good evening. Tonight I come to you with a number of donations. This time of year is very, very busy in our schools with opportunities for our students to travel a bit and see some different experiences, and you'll see that reflected in our donations. Tonight we thank Kristen Brunton, Misael Menchaca, Amy Pearson, Gail Bratton, Ginger Middleton, Heather Pendland, and Joe and Rachel Etherington for their donations to help provide funds for students to go to Washington, D.C. Pam Kirk provided a donation of Dairy Queen gift certificates to teachers who completed round 4 of the RCS March Madness competition that is provided by Mr. Shenison and the e-learning team. Candace Drewley provided a donation to the track team, and that is a co-ed team at the high school. Jessica Irwin, Mr. and Mrs. Austin Schultz, and First Bank Richmond donated to the RHS boys golf team, and Richmond Power and Light donated in memory of Robert Ray to Richmond Athletics. Tonight, I thank all of these donors, and I ask that the board accept $1,678.08 in donations.
All right, do I have a motion to accept the donations?
I
Motion
move to approve the donations as presented.
Motion from Aaron, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second from Brad. Obviously, we all say thank you. Any other comments or questions? All those in favor of accepting the donations signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we have a second reading.
Okay, the second reading this evening of policy 3430. I'm going to ask Mrs. O'Brien if she has any comments that she'd like to make with this, as she's been working with Mr. Cross to make sure that this is aligned in the appropriate manner. So, Mrs. O'Brien or Mr. Cross?
Just a few corrections or updates since the first reading, again with review from Mr. Cross. Also, just some suggestions and conversations with the Department of Labor. One of the changes is making sure that employees are not performing work-related tasks or on school property for work-related tasks when they are on a leave of absence. That staff members are not eligible for leave pursuant to the policy if they are working elsewhere during that leave. And then a change in the reporting period, because we do have so many employees on different calendars, that we would change from a fixed period to a 12-month period, which allows you to basically create a calendar for each individual employee. It's just they get a 12-month period from whatever date that they apply for FMLA. And also just with the suggestion from Mr. Weber, we added some clarification language for the certification piece.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve second reading and adopt policy 3430 with the included adjustments?
I'll make the motion.
Motion from Jeff, do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second from Dixie. Any other comments or questions?
I just appreciate the fact, having gone through using the act, I really appreciate the fact that the employees are told not to do work and people are not asking them to do work. I think that's really important. And I think you guys need to really, not get them in trouble, but make them understand that that's. The other thing is, do you have problems with the 15-day notice? Because I see problems with physicians reacting that
Right.
quickly sometimes.
The 15-day notice comes from the Department of Labor. That's not an RCS rule. There are times when you have a doctor that's out of town, or if it's a specialist. The main thing that the main guidance from the Department of Labor is just to make sure that we're consistent in what we're doing.
So as long as you've got the notification from the employee, and then you're not so stringent if it's 17 days by the time the physician gets the paperwork in?
Correct. We work very closely with the Department of Labor and with the employee.
Okay, good.
Any other questions or comments? All those in favor of approving policy 3430, or adopting, I should say, 3430, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. Summer athletic camps.
Our next action item this evening is 5.03, and that is our summer athletic camps. I'm going to ask Dr. Reynolds if he would speak to this, please.
Great, thank you, Mr. Terrell. At this time, I'd like to ask for approval for the RHS Summer Athletic Camps list and applications for 2018. The summer camp application has gone through the appropriate review and discussion process. Similar to our previous year's offerings, we'll be offering track and field, football, basketball, soccer, wrestling, tennis, volleyball, softball, baseball, and swimming again this summer. I recommend that the board approve the attached RHS Athletic Camp list and application.
Do I have a motion to accept this list of athletic camps? Motion from Debbie Moore. Have a second?
Second.
Second from Aaron Stevens. Any comments or questions?
Are there more camps than we normally have?
Yes.
Is it about the same?
I love that it's on one form. I don't know if that's the first year or the second year, I can't remember, but it's a phenomenal idea. I think that's amazing. And it looks super impressive that way.
Well, there's lots of opportunities for kids
It's a great
to
idea.
participate.
Any other comments or questions? All those in favor of approving the summer athletic camps signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Very good, thank you.
Okay, our next action item this evening is 5.04, our Project Lead the Way Costa Rica overnight field trip. I'm going to ask Dr. Reynolds to speak to this.
Thank you. Again, I've got a couple of exciting opportunities for our student. Both of those being led by Heidi Histrich. The first one will be for spring break 2020. So we're a little ways away, but she, of course, is ultra organized and want to make sure we start fundraising opportunities for our students.
Takes a while, I'm guessing.
Yeah, it's a big trip. It's to Costa Rica. It'll be spring break of 2020. They'd fly out of Indianapolis, and you see the detailed trip. It's a Costa Rica sea turtle and ecological program. Sounds amazing. Yeah, as we get, of course, closer, we'll have a little better understanding of students and participation. But like to get this approved soon so we can start that fundraising process for those kids.
All right. Do I have a motion to approve the Costa Rica trip?
I move.
Motion by Dixie, second. Second by Debbie Moore. Any comments or questions?
We don't even have the 2020 calendar set yet, do we?
No.
Okay, so that's going to vary on that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I'm just glad because that means she's sticking with us.
Now you're stuck, girl. All right. I think that's phenomenal. I
Suzanne?
love it. Yes, please.
I would think the board should understand that that it has the authority to revisit this should there be any type of degeneration of the level of security as determined by Homeland Security for travel abroad.
That's a
something
very
that's
good
always a
appreciate that.
consideration. We certainly don't want to have that be the damper on the fundraising, but I applaud the folks for bringing it to us so early. But as we all know in this world today, a lot can happen in the next 2 years.
Good point.
Thank you for bringing that up. That's a very good point. Any other comments? All those in favor of approving the Costa Rica trip for 2020 signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed?
All right, 5.05 is our HOSA overnight field trip. I'm going to ask Dr. Jones to speak to that as well.
This field trip's a little sooner, a little closer to home, but another outstanding opportunity. It's for fall break, October 2018. It's to go to Tennessee, Deer Lodge, Knoxville, and Rockford, and of course all the details for that trip is attached as well. Just another terrific, outstanding learning opportunity for our students. So I ask for approval for the HOSA, RHS HOSA students to participate on fall break of 2018.
Do I have a motion to approve the Tennessee trip for HOSA?
All motion.
Motion by Brad, second. Second by Jeff. Any other comments or questions on that trip?
Just a question. I noticed that we got a grant from the Women's Foundation, Women's Fund, but each student still needs to pay $100 additional. Why is that? There wasn't enough money? Oh, okay.
Probably didn't cover everything.
Okay. I see. Oh, it says grant didn't cover 90%. Thank you.
All right, any other comments or questions? All those in favor of approving the HOSA trip to Tennessee signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Very good.
Okay, our last action item this evening is 5.06, and that is the master planning recommendation. Included in your package, you will find my recommendation for moving forward with master planning. I have included 3 different time frames that are essential to meeting the timelines that are necessary in addressing the needs that are included with this process. The master planning recommendation, the first timeline will be the immediate action for the next school year, the 18-19 school year. My recommendation is to remain status quo with building utilization and grade configuration for the 18-19 school year. I recommend that we adjust the elementary school boundaries with the goal of every school being at 85% capacity. I recommend that at the Hibbard building, we realign with the other district schools with staffing and 8-step plans. I recommend that the intermediate school boundaries will remain the same for the 18-19 school year. And the final one for this next coming time frame of next school year, based on the points above, we will then develop the list for the summer projects for the summer of 2018. During this summer then through the 2018-19 school year, the first recommendation I would have would be to determine if our tax rate will remain the same, increase, or decrease with debt coming off. Bonds must be taken out in 2018 for the 2019 debt service tax rate to stay consistent for our taxpayers. If the tax rate is to stay the same or go up, how long would the board like to look at issuing debt, long-term versus short-term, to provide time for further discussion? We also need to look at the debt service as a part of the budget process. Final deadline for closing of school bonds is late November, early December. Timeline for board decisions is a minimum of 3 months to issue bonds. So August is the latest that we can push any decisions in this area. I also recommend throughout the next school year then that we evaluate the middle school grade configurations and course offerings. I also recommend that we utilize the next school year to evaluate district-wide or athletic programs, and then further review of our boundaries focusing on the intermediate schools based on the grade configuration and course offerings determination and the impact that that may have on school boundaries. Then the third time frame is 1 to 3 years. We need to decide the scope of the Richmond High School remodel. We need to prioritize the recommendations that have been made for the other buildings. We need to consider our debt consideration based on the first 2 points and come up with a plan that we are going to move forward with. Programming and projects based on the decisions made regarding master planning, and then included in that will also be athletic facility evaluations. So tonight, I am asking for board action, for the board to take action on the first portion of this recommendation so that we may address the current needs within our district and prepare for the next school year. I ask for your approval to, 1, continue with our current building utilization and current grade configuration for the 18-19 school year. 2, to adjust the elementary school boundaries with the goal of every school being at 85% capacity. 3, continue with the current intermediate school boundaries for the 18-19 school year.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve the recommendation as presented?
So moved.
Motion by Aaron, do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Dixie. Do I have some comments or questions?
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
Well, I'm, just for clarification, the last part where he asked for board action is 3 bullet points, but in the upper beginning, there's 5 listed. So is he not asking for action tonight on the Hibbard staffing and 8-step plan and/or developing the project list for the summer?
So staffing and programmatic changes within buildings is not an actionable item. It's more of an informational recommendation or information for the board to understand what the plans are there.
So we can discuss those if we want to, though.
You can discuss anything and everything in the whole recommendation.
Well, that just, I guess I just now caught that, I thought we were voting on all 5 of those sections. I did not realize, I guess I didn't read the bottom well enough to. And I've got some questions and some comments. I don't know if you want me to start. I guess I'll start first. I don't have, I mean, I like the fact that we're status quo on the building utilization and grade configurations, because I think that should be a lengthy process, at least a school year anyway. And I don't have a problem with the same thing because we're going to be status quo with the intermediate school boundaries for the 18-19 school year. Those 2 items as it stands make sense to me because I think anytime that we go through a process, we should have time for input from the public, from the people that it affects, and it allows us to put the plan together because those decisions are going to form everything that we do moving forward with our debt, with our reconfiguration, with whatever it is. So with that being said, I'm against adjusting right now the elementary school boundaries because we're going to go to 6 school buildings, and it's going to affect every, at least from what I could see on the map, it will affect every school at some form. And even when we were going through the community input meetings, one of the parents that I was talking to made a comment, and we were talking about grade reconfigurations at that time on whether she had a student that was approaching the 5th grade level, and she was more concerned about us making quick and reactionary decisions and not work towards a long-term plan or a goal. So if we're going to adjust elementary boundaries, then I kind of think, well, wait a minute, we should make some determinations first. Determination 1, we're going to leave the pre-K through 4th grade in the elementaries. Or maybe determination 2, we're not going to close a building. And I'm not saying these things because we are going to make changes. I'm just saying these are part of our discussions. Or if we affect the intermediate grades and okay, well, we want to move 5th grade back to the elementary. I just think that's our whole goal for the next, I mean, really, if you're talking about the financing and the bonding and the processes that we need to go through there, I think we need to answer those questions within the next 8 to 12 months. So I don't see any reason to risk boundaries adjustment now and then turn around with the potential of the next school year having to adjust the boundaries again. To me, it makes more sense to do it once if we have to do it at all. I realize Charles is at 110% capacity. I think that's the number that we've been given. So I think we've created the problem ourselves with the overcapacity because we had board policy at one point that said we could stop it. And we can stop it. We can look at some other options as far as moving classes temporarily, or we got some space at Hibbard. We can move a couple classes. I don't know what the options are because we've really not had an opportunity to discuss those options. I mean, our whole discussion essentially has been the last 5 days via email with half of the board members participating and no community and no involvement with anybody else. That's just not the way I like to do things. I think even if we said we have no choice but to change the school boundaries, then I don't think it's even right for us to vote on that tonight until we come back out to the public and say, this is what we're going to do, and give them a chance to react. So I guess my question is, are we voting on all 3 of these independently, or are we voting just all or none?
Well,
That's up to you guys.
let's talk a little further about the not moving on the boundaries a little bit. Because one of the things we did learn from the work that has gone on so far is that clearly, I think it's fairly clear that, for example, one of the moves that you discussed was the potential of moving 5th grade back to elementary, which obviously that would be very difficult to do with the space that we have so far, right?
Unless we went back to a pre-K center. I mean, that's the whole purpose. There's a lot of discussion there.
So then alternatives to, so you would just, maybe your thought was maybe just focus on temporarily fixing Charles, and then what about Westview?
Well, Westview, I think, of course, I don't know. There's a lot of, I know there's a lot of if and ors.
Oh, no question.
I mean, as I went back and I was trying to look at, Todd did when I asked him to send me the older policies, because I remember going through this when we created the policy, when we had the problem at Westview and we had to move the 6th graders over to the wing at Dennis, and
And that's very disruptive also.
it was, and so I remember all that process. So we deliberated and we spent a ton of time coming up with the best attempt that we had at that time to not to put ourselves into that position again. And and when we get to a building that's at 100% capacity, then I guess my first thought is,
Why didn't we turn people away?
yeah, why didn't, I would much rather upset one family than turn around and then upset 100 families because we're going to adjust the boundaries. Now, I don't want to really upset any family, but if I have a process, so I'm thinking, and I really don't, and I know we don't want to upset anyone, especially when it comes to enrollment, because we want them to enroll. We need the student count. We want the student in our buildings.
Best place for them.
But then on the flip side, if I'm a homeowner and I bought a house in this particular area, just the attitude of saying, okay, well, we're going to have to adjust boundaries every 2 or 3 years, as a parent and a taxpayer, that doesn't fly for me either.
How do you avoid that, though, when
well,
there's more houses?
I think that's why we went through that whole process of
Right.
developing board policy, I mean, we had some real meat in that. And then we changed it a couple years ago.
But even with that policy, you're still sending people who bought a house in a particular district somewhere else.
Well, right, but you're not affecting 99 other families. I think we have some ways to temporarily solve the problem for this next year. I don't know if I didn't ask the questions like, have we sent out the forms for your students to be enrolled next year, and are we just using numbers from this grade level to moving up? Have we verified that everybody that is still in the school district still lives in that school district? They just didn't move out and they still are transferring it in?
They did do that.
We addressed that.
So, there's a lot of processes that we can look at. I know the pre-K classrooms are small enough that we can't really use them for a classroom, but could we take the pre-K out? Or could we take pre-K and K out this year? Can we take, 2 grades or 3 grades or whatever levels that we have of the 4th grade? Can we take them over to Hibbert this year? I don't know. But I think we didn't have the opportunity to investigate those options. Now, I'm not saying the cabinet hasn't, because the recommendation he got it to us early, last Thursday?
Wednesday.
So, we're here our 7th day after getting that recommendation for action. And I just...
The issue being that fall planning has to start, probably has already needed to start. So I guess.
I understand that.
And I get your concern. Everyone has it. And we've been through, some of us that have been on the board a while have been through how many different scoots and moves, and so I get that too. My concern is that while there are issues with 110%, I think some of the same issues with low enrollment schools, in that then if you do get 30 third graders or whatever, that's not enough for 2 teachers perhaps, but it's too many for 1, and some of those kinds of things are happening as well. So,
and we've had those issues too.
Right.
So
well, and that's
so that's where I was kind of like, well, the idea of at least making it equitable.
And it's not,
was
and I understand
appealing.
it's not fair to the principal at Charles, and it's not fair, now the good news is all the teachers are still within the targets. I mean, I think 21, 22 was the average class size, and I think on the 4th grade, it was 27. I'm looking for help here.
I don't know what exactly he's the one that prepared the list for us. So.
Yeah, Charles, the 4th grades are large.
So, I noticed that again, we should have really, if this was, we knew last year or 2 years ago that this was going to be a problem. As I was looking at, I think we have 3 4th grade levels at Charles, I think.
Yeah.
But we have like 5 kindergarten levels or 1st grade levels or something.
Yeah, 5
So,
kindergarten, 5.
that seemed. So we knew it was, we knew it was coming. So why do we wait for a week to address it?
Well, can I say something too? We're talking about elementary, but the long-term effects on what's going to happen to Charles and Dennis next year, that 4th grade group, that large 4th grade group is going into those schools. If I'm not mistaken, isn't Test running at about a short from being 100 kids from being over capacity?
No, I don't think
Is
so.
it less than that?
No, Test is
at 82.
Middle schools, I think, are 82. Yeah.
Yeah,
So can you imagine all those 4th graders going to those schools now and that capacity increasing? We got to do something.
Well, and I think the other thing we need to think about is, it's no one's fault, community, ours, or anyone else's, that we have declining enrollment. We've had to close schools. We have to keep shifting enrollment to fit our schools. I think our purpose is to provide the best learning environment for our kids that we can. Overcrowding is not good, and when you have schools with less capacity, which I remember one kindergarten class in particular, I think it was at Highland, that had like 40 kids in it, you don't have enough for 2 teachers, and then you're sending in aides. It was just a bad situation. So that occurs too. And anytime you begin to shift boundary lines, it's a domino effect. I don't care what you try to do. That's just the way it is. And until our population stabilizes, this is what we kind of have to do to make the best learning environment possible for our kids and for our teachers to teach in. So,
I think you made a couple of great points there. One, I don't know that our population will ever stabilize with the transient community that we have.
You should have
Okay.
2 elementaries or 1.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, if you had 2 super elementaries, then the
Right.
movement
Um,
changes.
That's a whole different
You
basketball.
made a comment that sparked my interest here about wanting what's the best learning environment for kids. One of the reasons I asked earlier in the week via email what was the criteria we went by for high ability. Do we have the ability, pun on words, to expand the hybrid program to increase maybe an additional 3rd or 4th grade class there, or even start like a early high ability cadet class, whatever, to where we could get maybe a 2nd grade going to help alleviate some of the situations we have right now short term. My whole problem with the putting new boundary lines right now, just like Jeff said, you don't want to upset families, but inevitably somebody's going to be upset. But I don't want to upset any families at all possible while we're entering this master plan process, to where I think if we can buy another year with the current boundaries that we have, then we can really lay out and get our feet on firm ground with a distinct master plan of what it's going to look like, including grade configuration, including boundaries, including remodels, scopes of work, tax levy, everything that we need to get going here. And I don't want to just put something out there too quickly and drive off some potential families. To what you said, you move into a neighborhood for a lot of different reasons. And one of them, if you have kids, is for school district. So, you know, if you live out on Fouts Road and, you know, you moved there originally to go to Garrison, and then you compromise, now you're going to Charles, and now the new boundary is going to send you all the way over to the other side of town to Westview. That's a prime example of a family that's in the past 6 or 7 years this will be the 2nd or 3rd redistricting. So I don't know.
It's an intriguing dilemma, and I've looked up a little bit, and it looks to me as though lots of urban districts are getting caught in this around the country, in that it's because family sizes and movements of families, and so it's really almost difficult to keep the borders solid. And even some of our policies, I'm not sure would have addressed it. Westview's a great example. I mean, we've had, in my time on the board, I think 2 or 3 iterations of too empty, too full, too empty, too full.
2 or 3 years ago, it was like 60%. So
yeah, I mean, we moved kindergartners to. We did a temporary fix there. We moved kindergartners to Fairview, and we moved 6th graders to Dennis.
So we have such a large 4th grade class at Charles, and is the same thing at Westview, the 4th grade class? Okay. Can we initiate some phone calls to parents that are right on those affected areas and say, hey,
I think he's talking.
in lieu of redistricting, you know, would you be willing to potentially move your kid to Vale or Star or Crestdale or wherever the boundary would be? and do, I know it'd be some legwork, but do a volunteer basis, try to get those numbers down.
How do you manage transportation in that regard? Right. If it's a voluntary basis?
Well, are those, look at the kids that aren't on buses first.
Yeah.
When we had open, I guess, enrollment, I know we lived in Charles District and sent our child to a Star, but that, it was assumed transportation was on us. And I mean, if we could go to school choice, I think the
But it wasn't
presumption
at that
is
time.
that you make a choice based on, I mean, if you make a choice out of your district, transportation is on you.
We have 3 third-grade classes coming up next year for 4th grade.
And there's 4 now, is that what you said?
I think a combination of maybe looking at, I mean, looking at the master planning, pre-K was pretty much split between centralized and in the schools, almost right down the middle.
40 point,
If we had a hybrid,
50.1.
you know, maybe we had a big preschool center at Crestdale and another school, and we alleviate Westview and Charles. I know we don't gain those classrooms, but that takes our numbers down considerably. If we look at that, and maybe if we don't shoot for 85%, let's shoot for 95%, and then maybe have some other, because we're not going to pull enough kids out to gain classrooms. I mean, you're pulling 2-3 kids out of your class, sort of. But I'm not comfortable moving ahead without having the public see the plan. I mean, it's fairly drastic in my opinion, and it's only fair that they have opportunity to input, and they haven't seen it, so they can't have that input, and so I just can't support it tonight.
Rob, you want to speak to the number of students that we looked at that would come out of Charles and the relief that it would offer?
Oh, you got us put on the spot.
Told him be ready.
70
We
kids,
pull-
come by the number.
Yeah, we pull 70.
70?
Yes, so we're pulling from 2, based on the diagram we have, we'd be pulling from 2 sections of town, just in 2 areas, so, for Charles, because it's a heavily populated area, so.
But in Charles' 480 number, does that include pre-K?
What we did was,
Does or does not?
I don't believe it does.
I mean, they have 3 sections.
we based it on 440, because what you do with preschool, we have 1 preschool room there at Charles, so that's 15 kids for the whole day, so all you need is 15 seats, so.
Okay, yeah.
So, it's, you know, so we based everything off of that. Then we said, all right, what we did was we took the 4th graders out. And if I could answer Mr. Moore's question about the 4th graders going into the middle school, currently we have 395 4th graders, okay, that's going to matriculate up. Right now we have 374 8th graders who are going to matriculate to the high school. So it's just a 20-point difference
So
there.
will that leave test about
So-
90%?
No, it is still leaving the 80s, because
Okay.
you still have, your capacity there is pretty low. I mean, you know,
Okay.
we're still low, so that, I don't think it'll affect that bigger 4th grader going in there. So what we do is
Thank
took those 4th graders out, because we know they're not gonna be there, because we wanted to know where these kids live right now for the map. So we looked at the kindergartners all the way to 3rd graders. That gives us, those kids next year are gonna be in 1st grade to 4th grade. If no one moves, and we know people are gonna move, but that's gonna give us a good average, and it gives us an opportunity to look at neighborhoods. Hidden Valley, when we looked at this 3 years ago, not a lot of kids. Now you have maybe 3rd generation from when I was in school, they're coming back in there, and you have more students that live there. Fairview, however, is low on their student level, for that elementary level. So that's how you can get that shift, just in
That
3
used to be
years,
high.
or 2 years. But, so we took that, and then we looked at the numbers for your average incoming kindergarten. We usually get 100 kids sign up for Charles. So we took that and we said, okay, we need to save 100 seats there. So that gives us that balance of the numbers we need, that we need to preserve for, say, Charles, and then we just built the maps around those numbers. So I don't know if that answers your question, but we looked at the current population, took the 4th graders out because we know
I
they're
think it
going
was
somewhere
Todd's
else.
question, but
Yeah, Todd's the one who put him on the spot.
So, I'm sure you all considered this. What possible temporary solutions to our problem have you considered? And then I'm certain there were probably some issues with those. So tell us what you've already considered, and that might help us.
So Jeff brought up the question of, do we have students that are in the buildings that are overcrowded right now that don't live within the district? And in 2015, the board took a real strong stance about not having transfers, inner transfers within the corporation, going from one school to another. You need to go to school where you live, and we've been really stringent on that. And so we only have 2 transfers at Westview, and one of those families is from Northeastern, one student's from Northeastern, and the other one is from Centerville. So we don't have a lot of that going on. At Charles, we don't know of any. Now, I preface that with, if a family moves out of the boundary area of a particular school, and they don't tell us, and they provide their own transportation, we don't have any way of knowing that, nor do we have the resources to continually try to chase them down to find out if they moved or not. Now, if they bring in a change of address and we know it's outside, then we tell them they have to go. So that kind of gives you an idea. Right now, our buildings are, the students who are attending in our buildings live in the boundaries of those buildings. To speak to Jeff's concern about what if we were to add 5th graders back, I think one of the things that we've got to do as we move forward with master planning is we really have to look at what is it we can even consider as a possible option. And when you look at our current buildings and where, if we were to pull all the preschools out, I don't believe we'd have the capacity to add 5th grade back, even if that was the case. But then we have to look at where's preschool going? And we don't have a facility right now that we could even put that in. Obviously, there's room at the high school. I'm not sure if that's the most ideal, but the other problem that we run into is we find now, even with, excuse me, the preschools being in the elementaries and the boundary areas, when the weather turns, fewer of those students come, just simply because transportation is an issue, because we don't provide transportation. And if they're walking, or even if they're driving to bring their preschoolers to school, a lot of times when the weather turns cold or rainy, they don't come. Putting them all in one center would even make that problem more real, because the transportation would be a big part of that. So in looking at what are other options for this, I was at Dennis when Westview came over, and part of my responsibilities as the assistant principal at that time was I supervised the Westview kids that were in our building. And there were challenges that went with that. We made it work for, I think it was 2 years. So we have looked at that, and we have some space available. We have space available at Vail. We could make it work at Hibbard. It'd be really tight and would put us in the situation we're trying to get away from at Charles, and that is where we've got art class meeting on the stage, or 1 or 2 days a week where they're actually moving into the or into the gym with music class, because they can't even be on the stage because art is on the stage. So, and like I shared with all of you, when I was there during ISTEP testing, they had gym going on, PE going on in half the gymnasium, and media center going on, library going on in the other half, because they're so full. They're providing pull-out services to students in rooms that are 8 by 10, and you can fit 4 or 5 kids in there, because they're using every possible space. And as the at-risk population continues to grow, we know that students need more space in order to function, or to be able to have a better educational environment for them. So we have some room that we could look at moving 4th graders to other buildings. That brings up transportation issues. If you've been at Charles at the beginning of the day or at the end of the day, you know how many of those parents bring their kids to school. And now all of a sudden we're saying you're bringing one kid to Charles, and then you're going to Hibbard and taking the other kid there. We know that the Hibbard building times don't align with elementaries. Vail, yep, they would line up, but again, I think we have some challenges there.
How does, while you're on that subject, how does
the third and fourth grade work at Hibbard as it is now? I mean, the majority of those students come from Charles, correct? I mean, there's like,
Dr. Reynolds, I'm gonna,
Yeah, they're all over the district.
so, and we provide the transportation from there to Hibbard?
They ride in on middle school buses and they're shuttled over.
Satellite over.
So they go to their elementary school,
they ride,
You go to Tester Dennis.
they go to Tester Dennis, and then
Which that's challenging. I mean, that you've, now you've got third and fourth graders on a middle school bus, but it's worked out fairly well.
Brad, you mentioned expanding the Logos program down to first or second grade. That's an option we could look at. I don't know, and looking at the Logos program right now and the number of students that come from across the district, I'm not sure that would give us the needed relief specifically at Charles to create the opening there, or to open classrooms. I mean, that's the bottom line. We've got to have open classrooms, or we're not accomplishing what we need to accomplish.
right, and that's where I was getting at by doing the maybe expanding the third and fourth grade. I know they've got quite a few students over there now.
Yeah.
But if we could maybe transfer a teacher from district into Hibbard and maybe the borderline high ability kids,
You're assuming that would relieve the pressure at Charles, though. And it
to
may
Charles
only
and
be-
Westview both.
It may
to-
only be a few kids from each of those
So,
schools.
But that's what we're talking about. We're talking about 3 third grades going into 4, or 4 third grades going into 3, whatever the stat you said. I'm confusing it here.
Which one?
We have a lot of third graders going up into the 4th. We have 4 third grade classes going into 3 fourth grade classrooms. Is that right?
We have 5 kindergarten, first grade, and then we move to 3 third and fourth grade currently. But the numbers drop too. It's like 103 or 5 in kindergarten at Charles, 101 or 2,
so
is what you mean?
what-
And then 84 third graders and 79 fourth graders currently at Charles-ish.
So 84 third graders.
We have 84.
I swear
third graders
you guys said earlier that we had a lot of third graders going up into 4th grade, and that was going to be one of the big problems by not having enough 4th grade classrooms.
We were talking about fourth graders going into fifth grade.
Okay.
Is what Ms.
Yeah,
Ms.
that's
Moore
what
was
you- that's the
asking.
question.
Okay,
Sorry.
I was mistaken, I apologize for that. But, so, do we have a certain grade level at Westview and Charles that are higher than the others? Or is it just every grade?
Like I said, K and 1 at Charles is bigger. They have like 100 kids in each grade level, but we try to keep those classes smaller too. Use those goals and caps, and we do our best to stay to those. And we just had third and fourth is just a little smaller right now over there. But if you have another group of 100 kindergartners,
I understand. What I'm looking at is buying a year or 2 to get to the master plan process, because I don't want to upset everything at once.
So let me address your question about if we were to maybe lower that standard of students who could get in there to Logos.
I'm not talking about lowering, but I'm looking at the ones that are maybe right there.
Okay. So when I got here, one of the things that we did was really tighten up how students got into the Logos program, because we needed to make sure that we were following guidelines that are given to us from the state. We need to be able to quantify why, so that we knew exactly why students were in that program. So if it ever went to any kind of state level or federal review as to who was in the program and who wasn't, we had actual data to show that.
Because it needs to be equitable.
Yes, it does need to be equitable. So, but one of the problems is when you start the range that we currently have in place, the next group, as we've looked at that, is a big difference between what's already there.
Okay.
And so, to your point, if there were some who were, teetering right there, that would be another thought, but I don't foresee it being enough. We would have to make a big enough move that it would be detrimental to the validity of the program. And I'm not sure that it would gain the number of seats that we would need at Charles and Westview to provide the relief that we would need.
And it would potentially pull students from all over the district.
Well, and I want
Have to.
I want to go back to the presentation we had tonight on blended learning. Because if you are trying to teach in a classroom and do the stations or do the blended learning, even in music and art, and you're trying to do that on a stage or in a half a gym or in a hallway or in a whatever, that becomes impossible to do. And I can remember when Dennis was super overcrowded and we had teachers going from room to room with a cart, which is an impossible way to teach and do a really good job. So I keep going back to the quality of teaching and the learning environment that we want our kids taught in. I mean, that's where I'm at.
And I think we really need to consider too, while we're looking at, and our conversation is really centered around Charles and Westview, those schools that are operating at low percentage and have fewer students, it really impacts them as well. So the resources that they're able to get through our Title I grants, through our special ed grants, through our general budget, through our general fund, are reduced as well simply because of the numbers. And so, yes, we've heard from the buildings, we've heard from teachers of the schools that are overcrowded or be above capacity, but we've also heard from those who are at lower capacities because of their concern about what they're able to offer. And so, it's a tough decision, I get that, but I really think what we've got to look at is what is best for kids and what puts us in the most equitable situation for our students. And I think that has to be our ultimate goal of what we do.
Well, and the other thing I think we need to keep to the forefront, I know people choose neighborhoods because of the schools. But if you go into any of our elementaries, the curriculum is aligned, the kids are all getting the same thing. They're all doing a good job. I mean, if you go in and visit, all of our elementary schools are doing a really good job with our kids. And we need to keep remembering that.
I would be very interested in some modular classrooms to rent for a year or two. Did we pursue that at all?
We haven't. I think one of the things that we've talked about it, one of my concerns with that is when we have excess capacity is putting students in, and we can call them modular classrooms, they're trailers, putting them in that environment to learn. And I've been in corporations, I've taught in a modular classroom. It's just not the same, but in my mind, being fiscally responsible and renting, leasing, buying, whatever it may be, I would have a hard time with that, but that's just me.
I mean, while less than ideal, I would think for a year or two, I think that's a viable, I mean, they had talked about doing it years ago, and I think.
We also talked about building 2 extra
And
classrooms
I
on it.
think none of that ever happened and has kind of caused some of the problems now. I think to spend a couple $100,000 on classrooms with everything coming up to keep our district and the parents informed and pleased with where they're at, I think it'd be worth investigating, but I do understand the downfall to it.
I think the other thing we have to think about too is the relief of the cafeteria at Charles and that number of students there. So when I was there the other day meeting with teachers, the first lunch started at 10:15.
Oh, gee whiz. Wow. It's barely past breakfast.
Yeah, and it doesn't really provide the relief in, so in the lunch area and some of the specials. But when you look at the services that are being provided, again, that building was built for a certain number, and we understand that. And we also know that with the changes that have been made in education with blended learning, as Dixie has mentioned, I think we have to keep that in mind as well.
Well, I don't disagree that we've got to do something to reduce the numbers. That's why I was trying to look at options like, we got 3 third-grade classrooms. It's got approximately 75 students. Those are going, I'm assuming, to 4th grade next year. That's, I was trying to think, okay, what would be an option is if we took all 3 4th grade classrooms and moved them to here. Or limit our, we're full. We're only going to take 2 kindergarten classrooms next year. I don't have the answer. I mean, whatever answer we do, we're going to upset someone. I mean, I know that. The boundaries is such a final action that we have the potential to do that adjustments 2 years in a row. And I just don't think that's fair to our parents, our taxpayers. I don't, especially with no warning. I mean, I could see the headlines tomorrow morning. Richmond Schools does it again.
Well, I can also see the fact that you're talking about putting all those kids in one area, parents having a fit about that. That's a busing nightmare. I wouldn't want my kid on the bus that long, because you don't know if they have to switch from one bus to the other bus to accommodate what's going on. I wouldn't want my kids in a module.
Yeah, and that's the thing about it is we're going to have 50
generic
different
learning
opinions,
environment,
so.
and I wouldn't want that. We just have to just get down to the grassroots of it, and we just have to. They came up with a plan. They have some ideas. Like, we can debate this for the next, whenever the next 5, 6, 7, 10 board meetings, if you guys want to. But at the end of the day, we have to come up with something.
Right.
So we entrust our cabinet to come up with a plan, to come up with some ideas, to be creative, to bring us something here. There's a motion on the table. Are we going to accept it or not? That's where we're at. We can talk about this forever, but at the end of the day, we have to accept the motion or not. So we've had a lot of discussion. We keep saying the same things over again.
And you're not going to like this master planning process, Debbie.
I already know.
Might
but
as
it's
well just
okay.
retire now, because we're going to make your hair fall out, girl.
Well, it's almost
Because we don't make decisions in 6 days.
But I
We just don't
understand,
do it.
I understand that, and I get that, but there's oftentimes, I've seen this board be very procrastinating a lot, and there's no reason for it. None. Makes no sense to me.
Well, I don't think you could say that's in this process.
Oh, well,
This
maybe not
process-
right, maybe not today,
Yeah, so
but there's been plenty other times.
we've got a new leaf. We're talking about these last 6 days.
So,
So there's a motion on the board. What are we gonna do?
yeah,
Well, I guess the one question still needs to be answered. Are we doing it individually or all for none?
gotcha. As far as, you
So
want.
we essentially have
So
three
you're okay with
we-
status quo, that's stepping out.
Well, but I mean.
It's real risky.
But we're starting, our process is
Yeah,
to develop
I get
this.
that.
I mean.
I get that.
I mean,
So basically, let's see here, where are we? We are,
we basically have 3 recommendations. So we voted on this 3.
And they're all presented in one package, so.
We
should
did.
Vote on that one package?
so then the question becomes, and I've forgotten who made the motion.
I made the motion to accept the recommendation.
And so I guess,
Well, I mean, no vote continues status quo at the first one and the last one, so we're really just voting on the boundary adjustment.
Gotcha. That makes sense, John. Okay, so I guess we probably need to call for the vote.
Can we get a second?
Do we go back and
Dixie
talk
said-
about here, but after the vote then?
We can?
Okay.
All those in favor of accepting the recommendation to adjust the boundaries as presented signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
Wanna call for the vote? Or do you need to poll the board?
You have to poll.
I'm nay.
Nay.
Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
Nay.
Yes.
Aye, not yes.
Aye.
If you're gonna get on me,
Aye,
do
aye.
do it
Okay.
right.
Aye. Excuse me, Jeffrey.
All right.
And I say aye too. I said yes.
Now, can Hibbard come in?
Sure. Let's talk about the other parts. There were 5 bullet points at the, for the immediate action. And the status quo is explanatory, adjust boundaries, we just took care of. And intermediate boundaries the same. So then Hibbard will be aligned with other district schools with staffing and 8-step plans.
I have two different directions of questions. The first one, the 8-step plans, and maybe this is more process, but part of the rationale for, you call it informational, I guess. I don't want to missay that, but was that you wanted to institute the 8-step plan. And then with that, because of deficiencies that some of the students have been identified having, that you wanted to implement success time. Yeah, 50, the teachers that I've talked to, a lot of them don't like success time. A lot of them do, I guess, but because you're taking teachers that are not really credentialed in areas and teaching, for example, you may have an English teacher teaching math or something like that. So that's, I know some of the teachers aren't real pleased with that, but
How many teachers have you spoken to?
probably, see, it came up in 2 different buildings, so probably 14. But, and any teacher's welcome to send me an email if they have a different opinion. But, or want to give me an opinion. But, so with that in mind, I thought when we, Hibbard is doing 8 steps now.
Yes, they are.
Because when we first instituted 8 steps, I think one of the questions that we asked was, Hibbard wasn't part of the plan on the first year, nor was, I think, CYS. So I'm assuming CYS is also implementing 8 steps.
They're not, because their programs are so unique with students being there short term, that it's hard to get the data you need in order to have the data discussions then for that to turn around and drive the instruction that is happening in the classroom. They already have, for the most part, they're on individual education plans in that building already.
So they're already kind of doing a success plan because of the
Mm-hmm.
remediation that
They're
you
pretty
put
much
forth.
living it.
So, so now that Hibbard come, and I don't know a lot about this, so excuse my ignorance on it, but as we went through, as we went through the process of approving the funds and the institution of the 8 steps process, I thought it was supposed to be building developed on what the building wanted to do. And this almost sounds like it's been dictated from the corporate office that you will do this. So isn't that kind of different than, because I thought the whole purpose of 8 steps was to allow the building and the staff and the principals to do what works best for them and make it a building process, not a corporate process.
Yes. So you're correct. It is a building process, and the building will work with the principal and with Mike Shaughnessy and Sheila Hobbs and Chuck Reynolds as they go through this process. For the other elementary and intermediate buildings, there were 3 non-negotiables in the 8-step process. One is that you have CFA locally, or common formative assessments on a regular basis, so you can assess where your students are and then make sure that you're addressing their deficiencies, you're addressing maybe their proficiency, which areas are they exceeding and excelling in, so that you're providing additional support for them as well. So it's not just the same old for kids who get it and they need to move on. The second one of that then is the data discussion or learning log meetings where they talk through what's the data saying, and then that impacts what's happening in the classroom, but then also which students are in which success group, whether it's for math or English, because just because one is high and one is low doesn't mean they're just all thrown in there together, really looking at where they're at. The third one then is using the CFA. So you had CFAs, the learning log meetings, and then success time. Those were the three non-negotiables that were established in all of the other K-8 buildings.
I didn't
From
realize,
that,
I didn't
then-
realize the success time was a non-negotiable.
Yes. So from that, then the schools are given the ability to come up with what's that plan going to look like in their buildings, and they each address that differently.
So success time doesn't have to be a separate 30-minute class pulled out?
It does.
Because I hear a lot of teachers say they just soon have the time back in their subject area, so.
In order for us to address the needs of our students, we have that 30 minutes that's pulled out that's addressing those particular things. We understand that there are some teachers who may not be as strong in English or in math, and they're working with them. And Dr. Reynolds, I'm going to turn it over to you because you live this more than I do, and I'll let you talk through what that looks like.
Yeah, and it does. It looks different in each building. The elementary buildings already had. They already had time devoted to that. We just really changed the name to Success, and then gave them additional parameters with the common formative assessments. I think that first iteration of the common formative assessments, we put a team together, common formative assessment committee, and we wrote those and mapped those, and then through that process and through the years, we've given the flexibility back to the buildings, even outside that committee, to say, hey, this is created, but use your own discretion within the buildings to use use your own assessments if they, as the common formative assessments in that building. And it looks a little different in each building. At the intermediates, they brought to us that they would offer an additional period of English language arts. So their success time is really mainly math focused at the intermediate buildings at this time. But they still have success, but we allowed them that flexibility. They thought that that's what their building needed, and that's the direction they took. With Hibbard, we did not put those parameters on them. We didn't tell them they had to have success time. They didn't have to do the common formative assessments, but they kept the other language.
And I apologize for my ignorance. I didn't realize that 30-minute period was a non-negotiable because, I know you've heard the same comments I've heard, so. So I guess that brings brings to light the other question that I have with that is Hibbard is kind of a unique building. I mean, we have life skills, which has a much higher staffing ratio. We have the early college, and which is in itself its own state-run program, basically, or state program. And then we have the logos. So I guess I'm kind of curious how we can align staffing with the other buildings when, I mean, I can see some class ratios being the same if you're talking, English or math or something like that, but with the goals of the buildings, I'm a little concerned coupling that and staffing changes, which I'm not quite sure what that means, and any of the emails that I got this week didn't really define that. It just says align it with other buildings. And with the program that they have, the Logos base in itself kind of thrives on, project-based learning. So if we start to manipulate 30 minutes out of that day to be remediation, I'm just wondering, some of the discussions that we need to have in the future of the growth of the Logos program or how the program's going to evolve or all of those kinds of things, are we stepping in too soon until we go through that discussion as well?
So Chuck, let me start. First, when you said that the early college is a state-run, it's not state.
Well, I didn't mean state-run, but I mean, it's kind of throughout the state and kind of a popular.
Actually, we're the only middle school early college program in the state.
Right, I mean, okay, technically you're correct, but I mean, at the high school level.
At the high school?
Yeah.
But we're not talking about the high school at all.
Well, I know, but we kind of see this as our feeder program.
You talking about the structure of early college?
Well, just the program itself. I mean, I've not been in an early college classroom, so I don't know.
You're just talking about the fact that there's sort of a structure to it, or not a
There-
structure,
right, there's
but
kind of a structure.
framework, I guess.
Right, that's what I meant.
Okay.
I got
So, as far as could it impact their schedule and project-based, there'll be some impact on it. But what we know is that when we look at the overall growth that our students demonstrate, it's not where it needs to be. And we have to address those deficiencies to prepare them so when they get to the high school, they're ready to go. And that's been a problem since I came here in '98. I've heard those conversations about kids coming out of those programs and if they're ready to, not that there's anything wrong with the project time, not that there's anything wrong with the presentations, but it's again making sure that it's aligned with what our standards currently are, what the requirements are from the state, and then what we're measured on, making sure that those align. As far as staffing goes, that simply means that as we look at that staffing, we have to align it with the other needs around the district. So for instance, right now, we have band people that go there, we have orchestra people that go, that we share with other buildings, making sure that how that aligns. Looking at what are the different offerings that we have there. For instance, one of the things that we're looking at right now is increasing or adding Project Lead the Way at Hibbard. And we're also looking at that in the other intermediate buildings as well. And so it's aligning the resources and the staffing there. So it's not necessarily that it means there'll be positions cut. It means truly making it so that there's that alignment across all of the buildings.
I had a couple questions. You keep talking about their growth. Where is their proficiency of the Logos kids? I mean, if I'm at 90% and I need to get to 95, I mean, that's a small chunk of growth, but I'm at 90%.
It's the hardest to get
But it's
to.
harder.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, they're not, we don't pursue one and just don't, I mean,
No, absolutely.
I know we're chasing growth because it looks good and it helps us as a district, but I don't want to throw everything out to chase it.
Well, proficiency, it's a given, or I would like to think that it's a given that those students are going to maintain that proficiency. I think it's our goal is to grow those students. And you're right. I mean, they're not, if you're achieving at the 90th percentile, we don't expect you to grow 10% to be at 100, be in the 100th percentile.
But there is growth expected.
Yes, yes, absolutely, at the 90, because it's, when we look at NWA, it's based on the other folks that scored a 90. So their growth might be 5 points, over a course of a year might only be 5 points because it's, like you said, it's that tough last little step. But compared to the other 90s, that's the step they're taking. So the goal would be to achieve that 5-point step or whatever the step might be.
But at what cost? I mean, are we gonna restructure the whole program for, to pursue growth, which is kind of what it sounds like?
You're assuming everyone's at 90.
No, I'm not.
Oh, okay.
But, I mean, the one data point from years ago was we underperformed on PSAT, our Logos kids. I've never seen but 1 point, so I don't know if it's a trend, if it's a point in time. I mean, that to me is a good number, and I'd like to see where that number goes. And as a parent, that number actually means something. I mean, underperforming on PSAT, that's a national norm. I mean, I'd want my kids to achieve, but just to pursue NWEA growth, I'm not sure. Like for instance, how many of our Logos teachers, I believe there's 7, have their G&T certification?
I don't know that off the top of my head.
I mean, maybe that's a way to pursue improvement progress, to have qualified teachers. I mean, not saying they're not qualified, but I mean, I would think for a gifted program, we'd want gifted certified instructors.
A GT endorsement.
So,
Well, I think that, I think maybe the assumption is that that you're gonna get away from everything else they do to attain that growth. And I mean, that's not,
Well-
you can't have, I don't think you can have one without the other. I mean, you still have achievement, but you just want to expand that achievement. I mean, we never expect them to drop below that 90th if they're already in that high achieving blue.
Well, isn't it basically like whether they're in early college or Logos, if they have a math skill deficiency, they're using 30 minutes per day, not all, but the ones that have the math skill deficiencies, to improve the deficiencies. Same way in language arts.
Yeah, so, yeah. So if they would have that common formative assessment, if they struggled with this skill, they would be pulled during that success time and get that skill. If they showed mastery, we would put them into an enrichment, and they would have enrichment activities to build, deeper understanding, application of that skill.
but what we do now is if I'm a strong math student, I might be in 8th grade math. If I'm a weaker student, I might be in 6th grade. I mean, they are targeted where they go within the program already. So I guess if I'm a 7th grade student in 7th grade math and I'm struggling, I guess I'd have the option to go back to 6th grade math, or to have the success times possibly. I don't know which model would be better, but.
And the only concern with that is then when you go to state testing, you're being tested on 7th grade math. So if you've been working at 6th grade all year, and then you turn and go to the test, and it's all, and you can say, well, they still need that foundation. It's still that much
But
different.
in general, the Logos kids typically are a math ahead. I mean,
I'm not sure that,
in my experience, that's where they've been.
yeah, and I'm not sure that we need to address those who are not in that situation. And those who are, then they would be at that point where they'd be getting the enrichment anyway. And that could be a continuation of what they're currently doing.
I mean, I just see a restructuring of the program without, I've asked since I've been on the board what the plan was for the high ability, and it looks like we're getting changes without a plan.
Well, one of the things that we said was we had to wait through till we knew if we were gonna keep the building open, if that program was gonna change and go to the intermediate buildings, how was it gonna change before we started to do this? So this is truly looking at, we know that there are deficiencies right now, so giving the staff the opportunity and Mrs. Etherington the opportunity to look at what are the things that they can do to address it within their buildings and align with, what we're expecting out of all of our other buildings.
I'm assuming the plan is to obviously work with the staff to cause as little disruption to what their current program is as possible.
Just as we have done in every building,
Yeah.
the HSEP team will lead the process.
Gotcha.
And it won't be perfect, and there'll be changes in flight. It's a living document. We've provided funds throughout the year in the fall, and we have again in the spring for the HSEP team to come in and spend time making changes, developing the plan. So we're committed to them working through the process and coming up with a plan.
Well, the good news is there's nothing for us to vote on that one.
Yeah.
It's true.
Well, and I guess I would ask, since there are concerns, and obviously it's a little bit in the weeds for us, well, let's say a lot in the weeds for us to be kind of in the middle of it, but, because it feels like more of a programmatic change, but I don't think you all think that's what it is. And so, just keep us informed of how it's going.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think you said it. I think that we have 3 completely different programs at that
Right.
building.
Yep.
And.
Which is a challenge. I mean, I think that's a
Yeah.
challenge for Rachel. I
And
can see that.
I guess in my experience probably hurts me because, I've had children exposed to the project-based learning. Some people find it successful, some people probably have problems with it, but I just am concerned that if, the whole part of the goal, even for early college, I think, is we want to be a little different than the traditional classroom.
Mhm.
Yeah, we want to be able to compact our curriculum, and we want to have the flexibility to do this. We want to be, and if we start instituting processes against that without talking about a plan, I can't say it's wrong, right, wrong, or indifferent, but
Well, hopefully, I mean, the idea, I think, would be, or at least as I understand it, because I'm not a student of the 8-step, but the idea would be that the professionals in that building are going to make sure that doesn't happen. You see what I'm saying? They would be the ones sort of to say, hey, you asked us to do this, but it's going to disrupt this. What if we tried it another way? What if we did it like this? So that you can be, like you said, a little unique and still meet the needs, though, of, because I had kids in the Logos program too, and I had one that was great and one that did hit some bumps. So that having some of that in there would have really helped, I think.
I would agree the style's not for everyone, but what makes that building special is, and that program, and even early college, I think you could argue the same, is it lets kids find their way that would be lost in the general population. And maybe that's, you know, if I'm a gifted kid and I'm socially awkward or don't like to speak or whatever, they can find their way at Logos. And you saw the people up here at the beginning of the meeting. Over half of those kids are Logos kids. And some left Logos and went to Tess or Dennis, but were identified as such. But I mean, they find their way, they grow their wings and take off. And it's hard to, I mean, it is actually a special place in that, I mean, I've seen it. I've seen kids that just, I don't know how they would function in other buildings.
I mean, I think it's a jewel for us too. I really trust the teachers there to keep it that way. So I think it's addressing, it seems like it's addressing what is an issue without disrupting or changing those programs in a way before we get a chance to really do what you've wanted to do, which is really talk about our plan for.
Well, I mean, we've hampered Logos program since I've been involved. I mean, every year. I mean, and I mean, I think we need to decide: do we want to do project-based learning or do we not? I mean, is this the model we want or is it not? And I think what we've done is we have a hybrid model now that is nowhere near as successful as it used to be. I mean, both your kids went through.
How do you judge that, I guess?
Because I had two kids that went through the program.
But they're super successful. I guess I'm trying to say, why do you say it's not as successful as it once was?
But it's not as successful as it once was.
Hmm.
I mean, we can talk. I mean,
Data?
I'm not going to speak publicly about.
No,
my
that's fine. I
children,
was just talking about data.
But
You know, it seems like you said, more than half of those kids up here were products. That's awesome.
Well, I guess I don't see where a success program to work on skills would interfere with project-based learning. If that's the program.
Maybe a little bit of time.
That's done there, because part of the projects, if you're creative, could be done through the success.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Part. That would be our teacher. Awesome. Well,
I
keep
mean,
us, yeah,
that's-
that makes perfect sense, Judy. Or Judy, what did I just call you? Judy? Dixie. I'm in another.
And I don't want to send a signal to people that I don't want to address deficiencies in students' needs. That's not what I'm trying.
We didn't think that. We didn't
I
think
mean,
that. Yeah, that's.
I had to get that out there.
That's the quote in the article.
Me too.
Is that another headline you're giving the pal?
I can give them all kinds of headlines.
Oh, I know you can.
about Richmond sides and I side.
That'd be a good headline, right? So, all right, well, thank you for that,
A lot of big cities.
information.
And one more thing.
Sure.
You made the comment that we were in the weeds. He put us there. He put it on our recommendation list.
Truth. That is true.
I just
He
wanted
knows
to- I wanted
us
to be
too
upfront with you.
well. He knows us too well.
I wanted to be upfront with you.
All right, so at the risk of going on any further, I don't think any of us well, I didn't get this sense from any of you in your, questions regarding the agenda, that anyone has any particular issue with the rest of the recommendation, because what it did was, I think, give us sort of the key decisions that need to be made going forward to keep us in the best position possible to make whatever decision happens. So
It's not really a recommendation, it's a process.
right, but I appreciated it being in writing, and then because it makes it a little more orderly for me. I was feeling like, oh my gosh, all these things are looming on us, and we have some things we need to take care of. So having that in writing was helpful, so I do appreciate that. I think we're going to even probably need more detail going forward pretty quickly, but I do appreciate the fact that it's like, these are the decisions that have to be made and in what time frame. It helped me a bunch with that.
We will bring
Our
those to you.
financial meeting needs to be the next one.
I kind of agree with you on that. So that's where we can talk a little bit, like I said, you guys can go a little further with actual recommended dates, or even if you just say, hey, this has to happen before or by the last, I liked, in fact, you even said that the last possible date to do X was August. If you're thinking about doing this for this time frame, August is the last possible time you could vote on that. That's going to help us going forward as you start pushing through the next steps.
We'll do our best to keep you informed.
I
and up
know,
to date.
and it's a humongous, very big picture item, so I appreciate it. All right, so now we get to go back to board reports and old business.
Well, actually,
Oh, did I miss something?
well, to follow up on what you're talking about, I think also part of our next process is, like in the email that I sent out, there are some
Committees.
things that we need to consider. All of those need to happen hand in hand, I mean.
Agreed.
So,
Yeah, so
so how we talk about that and how, I mean, we got between now and the next board meeting.
okay. So if it would be easier for you to talk about that with a smaller group, or if you guys need to come up with sort of that, a little bit more timeline type of thing, that
We
would
can
be.
talk about that with the executive
Yeah,
committee when we set
yeah.
the agenda
I
and
just
look at
think
what we
that,
need to
yeah,
do.
sort of what needs to happen at what board meeting, if we need to do some gathering of committees, when's the next time to do, those financial decisions are the ones, and we want to give ourselves time to have the programmatic configuration, all of those discussions, so that in a healthy time frame, and that's, and I'm sorry, I'm really talking with my hands tonight, but yeah, that's okay. Thank you, I appreciate that. All right, so policy discussion is probably on me.
Yes.
And I had sent out information saying that I thought this is what we said last time. I think Jeff and Dixie were the only ones that sort of said, yep, that's what we said last time. And so,
I said it, I just didn't send it.
you didn't send it to me? But based on that, essentially, other than Jeff, I think had requested to be on the 100s instead of the 200s. I didn't really hear from anyone else that they were not happy with their assignment numbers. Everyone's good with that. So the idea going forward, and Kim and I will have to get together with the ones that are sort of looming already from ISBA, is that those would be sent out as they come through to the individual groups. So if there's 2000s, it would go to the 2000 group I'm assuming we're gonna have to come up with some sort of time frame at which we need to meet to discuss that. I don't know if you guys would be interested in allowing, I know our time is all busy, but
And it's getting ready to be a whole lot more busy.
well, and that's the other part of that is that there's multiples of us in multiple numbers, but I don't know if there's a way to virtually have those conversations. So I guess I'll leave that to you for creative thought. I was thinking we could always allow for a little bit of time.
We could use Canvas.
That would
You
be
could.
fantastic.
You all actually have accounts ready to
I
go?
would actually
I
love
don't know
to.
what I did with my password, but.
But that's a really great idea. That's a really great idea, because I just wrote myself a note. You need to get smart on Canvas. So, so maybe that is a very good excuse for us to do so.
12:31 of this.
Right? I mean, am I wrong? Please say.
No, we've had.
I've used it,
You had a course.
yeah.
Well, so anyway, the point being is that we also need to divvy up all the policies, not just the ones that are coming up with refreshment needed, and get our cycle going. And the idea was, what did you say, every 3 years. We want to have been through all of the policies. Now, obviously, the idea would be to divide each section into thirds, and what, but then how often in the meetings do we address? So every meeting, maybe you would have, well, we just have to have however number of meetings we have. We would assign a third of these, and split it out over a year. Is that fair? Okay. Well, I'll work on making sure you all get an instruction in Canvas. If we have to gather you all together for class in person, we could probably even make that arrangement. But I think there's also a virtual instruction that can be had, right?
There is.
So I will send all that information out to you, or with Todd's help or with Chuck's help, so that you know. And then Kim and I will work on a calendar.
But initially, it might be best to have it with everybody together so you can ask questions.
The Canvas instruction, I kind of agree with you on that. So,
We can make it part of a work session.
oh, that would be good.
Debbie's in Canvas right now.
Actually,
So,
that's
just so
really
you
good.
know.
Okay.
You go, Debbie.
I think that's actually a good idea, because that would also demonstrate,
As long as the priority of this doesn't affect our master planning.
Well, and that's the thing that we
that's
have
our
to keep in
issue.
mind.
We have to balance.
So I would just say offer to you, and you guys, obviously, this is what you're supposed to do. Since we just had all of our policies reviewed, and we have this huge thing looming with talking about having committees and talking about more meetings, do you put off that process?
And just deal with the ones that need to be addressed.
The ones that are sent to us
I
from
say let's
ISBA?
move forward with the process because.
And that's fine, I'm just offering.
Because most of the board policies you can read in 30 minutes. So
Well, tell you what,
we just won't, maybe we just won't get them done as quickly.
let us look at what a calendar would look like with a 3-year cycle and the ones that need to be addressed now, and see what that even would look like.
Because I would have swore that we didn't have them all on board docs, because I spent a lot of time trying to go through policies this past week, and it just seems like there's something missing.
Well,
There.
we weeded out a lot.
Yeah, we weeded
Yeah, we
a ton.
consolidated a
Old-
ton.
Old
Do
and
this.
Sure did.
repetitive. There were a lot of them that were repeats.
You just deleted them.
We did do that, though. There were a lot of deletions, so. Okay, well, let us take a stab at a calendar, then we'll look at it, and we'll immediately address those that are already sort of sitting there waiting for us from the ISBA, which I don't think it's a ton, but there's a few.
It's like 6.
Okay, and then,
And then how do we introduce, you said if board members have policies they're
something you
interested in
want to
looking at.
bring up, like one that you needs to be, so let's,
Well, just like the one we had tonight, Human Resources brings it up. Hey.
right, and that would have been a normal, that is a compliance thing. That was one of those things that would come from ISBA that says, hey, the law's changed, or, something's been noticed that doesn't, what's the word? That isn't compliant with law, and this is where the change needs to be. Or we made this change and we missed this. So those would be that kind of thing. And those would come from either the ISBA or from the cabinet saying, hey, there's a compliance problem. We noticed it when we went to, XYZ update at the IASBO or whatever.
Or from Ron.
Or from Ron, exactly. So that's one thing. What John, I think, is referring to is there's one that's in your craw that you want to relook
Policy that
at.
says who we are and what we do.
Right, and so that's something that, want to be rebrought to relook at it. So we didn't really discuss how we would like that to happen. Well, we sort of did, but we didn't really come to a conclusion on that one, I don't think.
Well, why can't that just be introduced to the board president on the agenda meeting for the next board meeting?
And then-
Under board business.
But do we discuss it as a group first? Do we then,
As a sub-policy group, or do we bring it to the whole board?
that's what I'm saying, is does the whole board talk about it first and say whether or not we want to send it to the policy group at this time? Or do we, how do you want to do that? What, is there anything in our bylaws, and of course we lost our, that would make that not what we said we were going to do?
I would want a stipulation that, Aaron proposes a policy. I don't want the policy review group to kill it. I think it should be the whole board.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So does the whole board say, okay, well, that's worth looking at, why don't we go ahead and send it to the policy group? Is that the order that ought to happen? Or, because a couple of them, I know there's a couple of them out there that would like us to look at a policy that has recently been discussed. So it's, I think the whole board has to say, hey.
Existing policy, not a new
Yeah,
one.
the whole board,
At one point, I mean, we talk a lot about transparency. At one point, we just need to bring it up under board reports and old business.
right, that's my question.
And just bring it up to the board, say, hey, I would like to review policy XYZ.
And if it's
That's-
if the whole board says, yeah, we want to do that,
Say-
then we send it to the
Say,
policy
or I
group.
would like to make a motion to review it, or I would like to propose a change at that point, or whatever, and say, similar to a first reading, say I throw
then
it out
that-
here,
right.
and it's either killed or adjusted and go into second reading.
So then the whole board, yeah, I can't be that quick, but the whole board then could decide whether to send it for the policy group to relook at it? Does that make sense?
Fine with me.
At the time, I thought you said you didn't want verbiage when it was brought up.
I kind of don't, because but at the same time, if the person who wants it reintroduced doesn't say a little bit about what they want, I'm not sure what the policy group's gonna look at. Does that make sense?
I mean,
Because
I'm
if you
just
bring,
trying
if
to
Aaron brings the
process.
policy, no, that's exactly right. If Aaron says, hey, I want you to look at policy XYZ, and he doesn't say, I have a problem with line 2, paragraph 4,
Yeah, you have to know that.
yeah, so you have to know that, and then the board could say, yeah,
State
okay.
law's changed, and I found out new state law.
Yeah, but even
or
the law-
non-compliant in there, or maybe something in the community has changed, and we should rethink, a section of the policy.
Right,
And
right,
this is
right.
why I would like to revisit it.
Right, and then the board can say,
Change
yeah, I
mascot.
think it's a good idea to move that to let that policy group talk about it,
John, you just made headlines.
and then brought it back, so. All right, so do we need to, does that need to be included in our bylaws for us to do that, or is that just a practice?
We're gonna have
Let's
to run
check
that
Ask
by
the
Ron.
policy review group whether
That's
that should
right.
be at the
Well,
bottom.
I am not gonna speak to the legality
No,
of that.
well, it just occurred to me, I'm not sure if that's just that's
Would you
just
like to,
our,
Dr. Ernst?
No.
if that's just our, just the way we accomplish what the,
I defer. It depends.
we'll check with legal just to make sure that we aren't creating a bylaw that doesn't exist. I think it's just a way we operate. We're charged with reviewing the policies. This is just a way for us to take that on. I don't think it needs to be that way, but I think it's worth checking, so we'll do that. All right, is there any other old business, legislative, anything we need to talk about? No? Okay. I'm
Vote.
spent.
Tell them to log off.
All right, so we have our next session of public commentary. Has anyone signed up since the last one? All right. Then we have a preview of upcoming meeting and events.
The main thing that I want to draw your attention to is the Celebration of Excellence, which is May 8th. That's a great time where we recognize so many of our own staff members, friends of education. If you can arrange your schedules at all to be there, I would encourage you to do that.
And tell Kim if you're coming, maybe.
Yeah, let Kim know. It's a great opportunity. It's at Civic Hall, and it's in the afternoon. Jennifer, what's our start time there?
3:10.
3:10. So if
It's
you
a
can be there,
Tuesday, so
great.
that's
It
why,
is.
right?
Yep, that's a great, it's just an awesome thing that I haven't seen replicated in any other corporation I've ever been in. So it's a great way to celebrate our teachers and our professionals and educators here.
Agreed. And really, if you recall, you received an email from Ray, because I did not recall receiving it, and she sent it to me again, of some of the high school-related important events where, and she even explained the board's participation in those. So I'm more than happy to resend that, because I really did forget about it, or I just didn't notice it in the 1,000 of emails, and I asked for it again. But it's a really good review of what those, especially those related to graduates, which as many of those as we can get to, that'd be great.
So for instance, the Career Center Awards is a great one.
That is a good one, too.
The Graduate Together with the ninth graders is a great one.
Absolutely.
The Adult Ed graduation
We
is
have
a great one.
invitations right here.
Yeah, the adult ed, it's invitations at your desk.
That one may be the most inspiring one.
Agreed.
In my opinion, just because of how those individuals
Stories.
persevere
The story.
to get to where the stories there are just amazing.
Very good. And I guess upcoming agenda or meetings? Preview of upcoming meetings?
That was it right there.
Oh, no upcoming meetings, okay.
Just the next board meeting.
All right, and we have a news conference. Anybody have any burning questions?
Still awake?
All right, and we kind of already did our bell ringer, but
That was our bell ringer, and, I would just echo the fact that what you saw tonight has been repeated at every level. There's so many great things happening with our students at the elementary level, intermediate level, and especially in the spring, it just really ramps up all the different opportunities, from robotics to every kind of educational opportunity for our kids. It's just amazing what our teachers and administrators do with our students.
it's a super busy time, but it will help you feel good about your service on the board if you attend as many of those as you can.
And be impressed of what we do.
Yeah, I mean, it makes you remember why you did it. That's, I guess, what I'm trying to say. Just makes you remember why, so.
Could you do me a favor and forward to the board the email you got from Ray? I'm just looking through here. I don't have that.
Most
Got it
definitely.
a long time ago.
Yeah, it's been a while. I will most definitely re-forward that, like I said, because I asked her for it and she forwarded it to me.
Okay, I'm back in February now. I see it. Okay.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, and we will see you in a few minutes.